Namaskar, a warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is Reshma Tiwari and with me is Nipunika Shahid bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. Prime Minister Narendra Modi holds bilateral talks with his Danish counterpart Mette Frederiksen in New Delhi. India and Denmark signed 4 agreements in different sectors including skill development and environment. Also decide to expand ties in fields of health and agriculture. Danish Prime Minister says Prime Minister Modi is an inspiration for the rest of the world. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar to pay a 4-day visit to Kyrgyz Republic, Kazakhstan and Armenia from tomorrow. Indian Coast Guard holds an important place in world's best maritime forces, says Defence Minister Rajnath Singh. Chinese President Xi Jinping vows reunification with Taiwan, says wants to see peaceful reunification occur under one country, two systems. And in women's cricket, Australia beat India by 4 wickets in second T20 in Queensland. As the nationwide free COVID-19 vaccination campaign at government facilities for those above 18 years is underway, we advise our young listeners to get vaccinated and help others get vaccinated. We also advise our listeners not to lower their guard as COVID-19 remains a threat to our health. Please stay at home unless it is essential to go out and continue to follow these 3 simple steps. Wear a face mask, maintain 2 gaz ki duri for social distancing and focus on hand and face hygiene. For any COVID-related information and guidance, contact the national helpline numbers 011-2397-8046 and 1075. And now the news in detail. India and Denmark today inked 4 agreements and decided to expand cooperation following bilateral talks between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his Danish counterpart Mette Frederiksen in New Delhi. The agreement was signed in the field of skill development and entrepreneurship, traditional knowledge digital library, establishing a center of excellence towards natural refrigerants for tropical climates with potential applications, and on mapping of groundwater resources and aquifers. In a statement after the talks, Prime Minister Modi said India and Denmark have continued their cooperation even during the pandemic. He said in our virtual summit a year ago, both the countries had taken the historic decision of Green Strategic Partnership. Mr. Modi said it shows that both India and Denmark are dedicated towards the environment.
आज से 1 साल पहले हमने अपनी वर्चुअल समिट में भारत और डेनमार्क के बीच ग्रीन स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप स्थापित का ऐतिहासिक निर्णय लिया था। यह हम दोनों देशों की दूरगामी सोच और पर्यावरण के प्रति सम्मान का प्रतीक है। यह पार्टनरशिप एक उदाहरण है कि किस प्रकार सामूहिक प्रयास के द्वारा टेक्नोलॉजी के माध्यम से पर्यावरण के लिए काम किया जा सकता है।
The Prime Minister said both the countries will work on several technologies in the sectors of food safety, cold chain, food processing, fertilizers, fisheries, aquaculture and others. Mr. Modi said both the countries have started a new partnership in the health sector. He said, we have also decided to cooperate on agro-tech to increase agriculture productivity and improve farmers' income. The Prime Minister said India and Denmark will also coordinate in smart water resource management and efficient supply chain sectors. He said it is a matter of happiness that Denmark has become a member of the International Solar Alliance. Mr. Modi said it is a new dimension of India-Denmark partnership. He said during the meeting, both sides not only reviewed the progress made under this partnership, but also reiterated the commitment to increasing cooperation on climate change in the near future. The Prime Minister also expressed his gratitude to Denmark for the strong support India has been receiving from it at various international fora. Mr. Modi also expressed his gratitude for the opportunity to host the next India-Nordic Summit and for inviting him to visit Denmark. The visiting Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, said India and Denmark are 2 democratic nations and both believe in an international system based on rules. She said the cooperation between India and Denmark is a great example of how green growth and green transition can go hand in hand. Ms. Frederiksen said both the countries have agreed to work together in the field of health and agriculture.
Our cooperation between India and Denmark is a great example on how green growth and green transition can go hand in hand. Today, we agreed to work even closer together on areas as health and agriculture.
Ms. Frederiksen said Mr. Modi is an inspiration for the rest of the world as he has set some very ambitious targets when it comes to clean water for over 1 million households and for renewable energy. Ms. Frederiksen said she is looking forward to continue the mutual cooperation. The Danish Prime Minister reached New Delhi late last night on a 3-day visit to India. Earlier in the morning, Ms. Frederiksen was accorded a ceremonial reception at the forecourts of the Rashtrapati Bhavan. Prime Minister Narendra Modi received and welcomed his counterpart there. She was given a guard of honor on the occasion. Speaking to media, the Danish Prime Minister said Denmark considers India as a close partner and she sees the visit as a milestone for Denmark-India bilateral relations. Later, she went to Rajghat and paid floral tributes to Father of the Nation, Mahatma Gandhi.
External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar will pay a 4-day official visit to Kyrgyz Republic, Kazakhstan and Armenia from tomorrow. Dr. Jaishankar will reach Kyrgyz Republic tomorrow for a 2-day visit. This will be his first visit to the country as External Affairs Minister. He will hold a bilateral meeting with the Foreign Minister of Kyrgyzstan and also call on the President of Kyrgyz Republic. Some agreements or MOUs are also expected to be signed during the visit. The External Affairs Minister will be in Kazakhstan for 2 days from Monday. He will attend the 6th ministerial meeting of the Conference of Interaction and Confidence Building Measures in Asia, SICA, in Nur Sultan. Kazakhstan is the current chair and initiator of the SICA Forum. Dr. Jaishankar is also expected to hold bilateral talks with Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Kazakhstan and call on the Kazakh leadership. The External Affairs Minister will be visiting Armenia on 12th and 13th of October. This will be the first ever visit of an External Affairs Minister of India to independent Armenia. He will have meetings with his Armenian counterpart as well as call on the Prime Minister and President of the National Assembly of Armenia. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh today said that it is not possible to create a comprehensive internal and external security framework without maritime security. Speaking at the investiture ceremony of Indian Coast Guard in New Delhi, Mr. Singh said, keeping India's maritime zones safe, secure and pollution-free ensures the security needs and also economic development. He said started with 4 to 6 ports, Indian Coast Guard now has more than 150 ships and 66 aircraft, and it holds an important place in the world's best maritime forces. The minister said today India is moving ahead on the path of rapid development and unhindered maritime activity is one of the major needs in this direction. On this occasion, Mr. Singh presented the Gallantry and Meritorious Service Medals to Indian Coast Guard personnel.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi will launch Indian Space Association ISPA on Monday at 11 a.m. through video conferencing. He will also interact with representatives of the space industry on this landmark occasion. Indian Space Association is the premier industry association of space and satellite companies which aspire to be the collective voice of the Indian space industry. It will undertake policy advocacy and engage with all stakeholders in the Indian space domain, including the government and its agencies. Echoing the Prime Minister's vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat, ISPA will help in making India self-reliant, technologically advanced and a leading player in the space arena. In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a discussion on development in Afghanistan. In conversation are Atul Aneja, international affairs expert, and Manas Pratim Bhuyan, journalist.
It's been nearly 2 months since the Taliban took control of Afghanistan. India has been engaged with almost all leading players on Afghan crisis, including with Russia, US, Iran, Central Asian countries, and a number of other players like France, UK, Germany in holding talks in dealing with the crisis. So obviously it is part of the discussions at the UN Security Council also as a member of UN Security Council. So Mr. Aneja, how do you see the overall Indian approach in dealing with the new reality in our neighborhood and our concerns over the threat of spilling over of terrorism into India from Afghanistan?
Yeah, I think India is going ahead and engaging all the stakeholders, Manas, who can influence the situation in Afghanistan. Now, our danger really is that Afghanistan, after the Taliban takeover, should not become a springboard for spreading terror, number one. And number two is that we want an inclusive government in Afghanistan and not a government which is dominated by the influence of Pakistan or ISI. Number three, we want that rights of ethnic minorities like the Hazaras and the Uzbeks and more significantly the Tajiks, which comprise about 40% of the population altogether, needs to be respected and their voice needs to be heard in the government. And then we obviously have big issue being a democratic country which respects human rights, that the rights of women should be respected under a new dispensation in Afghanistan. These are the central concerns. And Manas, we are going ahead and airing that with all the stakeholders. Among the stakeholders, I think Russia is exceptionally important as being old influencers of events in Eurasia. Iran is very important because they have a very strong ties with the Hazaras. Then in Central Asia, Tajikistan, which has very strong links with the ethnic Tajik population. So you have the Eurasian countries which are, then we go to the outer layer and the United States becomes important, both in terms of, though they are out physically from there, but they have certain capacities in terms of what is happening inside Afghanistan. And we are also talking to them. And then, of course, the European Union has its own concerns in Afghanistan. So that's the reason why we are understanding that we need to engage with all stakeholders which can influence the ground situation. And that is important to protect our core interests, which I mentioned a while ago.
Mr. Anuj, the U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman visited India a couple of days back. And during the visit, she made very interesting comments. After talks with Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla and NSA Ajit Doval, she said that India's security concerns will be the first and foremost and in the front and center for U.S. while it considers the security scenario in the region. So how do you see the statement by a very senior U.S. official on India's concerns about spilling over of terrorism into other parts of the region, as well as India's core concerns about an inclusive government, having an inclusive government in Afghanistan?
Manish, though, as I said, the Americans have exited, they have strong influence. They can strongly influence the situation in Afghanistan. And one of the main levers which they have is the lever over Pakistan. Now that they no longer are dependent on Pakistan for transit of war material and, the supply route which used to take place, which used to take supplies for American forces in Afghanistan through Pakistan, Pakistan's leverage over the Americans has reduced substantially. So there is more room for maneuver in the United States to influence Pakistani behavior. I think that is the key, because if you cannot see Afghan situation in isolation, you have to see it as an AFPAC situation and you have to see it together, because the root cause of some of the problems which are taking place in Afghanistan are really not inside Afghanistan but across the Durand line in Pakistan. That's where the Americans will come in big time. I think it's very important to see why India is so concerned, because you recall that when the Taliban took over on August 15th, there was sort of a government which was on its way to full formation. But after a couple of weeks, you have Faiz Hamid, the former head of the ISI, reaching Kabul. And instead of building a composite government of, the moderate section of the Taliban and others, what really happened was that the ISI said the Haqqani network became the core of the new government. And I think that's where India's problems really compound. Because the new government which has taken over in Afghanistan is really, if you think it through, is an ISI asset which India cannot accept. And that is why, though India did engage with the Taliban in Doha where our ambassador met, I think Mullah Barada, if I'm not mistaken, or somebody else in Doha. So we started the process, but after the visit of Faiz Hamid, that is a turning point where Taliban, the core hardline and intolerant element, is at the helm at this time. And Haqqani network is rapidly anti-India. It is totally involved. It is established that many of them, Haqqani group members, are proscribed by the United Nations or by individual governments who have put bounties on their head. It is proven that they are involved in kidnapping and narco-terrorism. So essentially Taliban under the Haqqanis, supported by the Pakistan ISI, form is no longer a normal state but is transiting and leaning towards a narco state. That is where India has put its foot down, that you cannot deal with this government in Taliban. And that is a message which has been sent also to the Russians and to the Iranians, who have been willing to engage with the Taliban, that you cannot have this complexion of the Taliban-led government in Afghanistan because of their deep links with money laundering, with terrorism and with narcotics. And therefore they are a danger not only to India but to all the neighboring countries. I think that message has gone through in a diplomacy, not just with the Americans, but also with the Russians and the Iranians and others. And you see that taking effect, because now none of the countries, including Pakistan, that's a separate case. But Imran Khan is also now talking and asking the Taliban to moderate its way. So and then you of course have these attacks which are taking place on minorities, etc., which are on Shias, which is completely miffed the Iranians. Probably they also have unnerved the Chinese. So you have now, I think Indian diplomacy has worked to the extent that we have sensitized the world, and you cannot be dealing with this form of government which has taken over after Faiz Hamid's visit. And I think that's a very important thrust of diplomacy, which is, I think, making impact not only with the Americans but all the regional stakeholders. And today you have a statement, or yesterday's statement by a senior Russian diplomat, which is coming all out in support of Tajikistan, the frontline state on Afghanistan, that we will fully support you not only under collective security treaty but bilaterally as well. I think people have made up their mind now that you cannot recognize or deal with this form of Taliban government, and that's where we are right now. And I think the situation therefore is not so bad for us, in the sense there is a global opinion which is wearing around to the Indian geography as well, and from here we need to move to the next steps.
Yeah, in fact, you rightly said the ISI-DZ goes to Kabul and facilitates, formation of a government that has 35 members, designated by the UN Security Council. So this is shocking. But besides the point, Sherman also said that the US and India are absolutely of one mind and one approach when it comes to Afghanistan. It's a very strong statement, in fact, in India's support. And we have seen diplomacy actually producing results for India, and the growing international pressure on Kabul, I think, will finally yield some results. Do you see, in fact, some changes in Kabul in the backdrop of mounting pressure from the international community? Afghanistan is now reeling under a humanitarian crisis, and international aid agencies are ready to provide assistance, provided unimpeded travel access is provided to various parts of Afghanistan. So how do you see the overall approach of the international community in separating two issues? One is to address the humanitarian crisis. The international community, including India and many other countries, have said that we are ready to provide humanitarian crisis, but we are not going to recognize the Taliban government, and they are ramping up pressure on the Taliban. So how do you see the overall approach in which India is also playing a very, very important role?
Yeah, I think surprisingly, you are finding some sort of a consensus which is being building up on the way to approach the Taliban. And I think it's a good thing. I just want to make a couple of points. One is the US rule, which is about a strong statement. But you see, India, exercising strategic autonomy, has to bond with all the member states. There are certain capabilities which the Americans have, which we must, because of our special relationship with the Americans, we need to go ahead with. Then there are certain capabilities which the Russians and the Iranians will get. In equal measure, we have to bond with them as well. So that balance, which produces the right result for us, we got to engage all the stakeholders. That's number one. Number two, about the Taliban behavior itself. Now, it is reeling under this pressure because there seems to be a consensus building around them. In fact, if you see the Doha round of talks, which has already started or is about to start, I think the thrust of Taliban's argument is going to be on, unfreezing its assets and somehow the removal of the economic stranglehold which has come on against them. So that's a lever which the world has on the Taliban now. The Taliban is demanding that it should no longer be economically isolated. But then if it wants to be, brought somewhat closer to the mainstream, then it itself has to change and become more inclusive and representative and do away with extremist behavior which it has shown quite recently and definitely in the mid-90s. So that is where you see a sense of some change in the Taliban behavior now coming in. Now we're going to have a couple of very interesting meetings, Manas. One, of course, Doha, but then there is a meeting of the Moscow format, which is going to take place in Moscow. It's again going to be a face-to-face meeting where most of the SCO members and others, and even the United States, is going to be representative. And along with that is going to be the Taliban also, which is sending a delegation. I think that's again an important meeting to go forward and speak to the Taliban in one voice that you will be accommodated only if there is a change, a genuine and a verifiable change in behavior. So these are the sort of forums we got to look out for and add pressure on the Taliban to do away. I think the most important, I keep like to repeat this, that you cannot have the Haqqanis ruling the game, being the center of power enough. That will not be acceptable, and that's something which India should reinforce in the meetings which are going ahead. In the Moscow format, India has been invited, so I don't know whether we are fixed at the level which we will be represented. But we have an invitation for that. I think we should utilize such forums to, reinforce our point of view. Because we are at the, very close geographically to Afghanistan. We have a problem with Pakistan. So I think stakes are very high for India, and we should utilize these forums which are coming up in an effort to add momentum of this pressure on the Taliban so that we can change regime behavior in Kabul.
Final question, in fact, under India's presidency of the United Nations Security Council, a resolution was adopted on August 30th that talked about the need for upholding human rights in Afghanistan. The resolution demanded that Afghan territory should not be used for terrorism and that a negotiated political settlement should be found out to the crisis. So do you think this resolution, in fact, adopted under India's presidency at the UN Security Council actually provides the ground, provides the framework to find a permanent solution to the Afghan crisis?
I think so, Manas. I think that's basically the fundamentals of finding some kind of a room for a solution. So I think that can be the base, the anchor around which the rest of diplomacy can flow. I think that contribution and the points which you mentioned are highly important, very significant, because they address or they promise to address the core issues through possibility of a roadmap to resolve this crisis. So they are foundational and they are fundamental. Right? I think that's already a solid contribution by India. I think because of the high stakes involved in Afghanistan, I think India needs to be highly proactive in its diplomatic intervention in Afghanistan. Because we are going to be impacted big time in this. And I think it's also a test for Indian diplomacy. I think we are doing fine, but we should not in any way be complacent and continue with the high energy which we have shown so far to make sure that our interests are protected.
Thank you, Mr. Anand. Thank you for your in-depth analysis about the current situation in Afghanistan and the role that India has been playing to drum up international support to address the situation. Thank you so very much.
You are very welcome, man.
This is All India Radio giving you the news. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on Twitter @AIR News Alerts.
Chinese President Xi Jinping on Saturday vowed for the reunification of Taiwan and the mainland amidst heightened tensions with the island. Speaking in the Great Hall of the People to commemorate the 110th anniversary of the revolution that ended the country's last imperial dynasty, Xi said the biggest obstacle to the reunification of China was the Taiwan Independence Force. In a toned-down rhetoric, Xi said he wanted to see peaceful reunification occur under a one-country, two-systems policy similar to that used in Hong Kong. In a significant achievement, India's COVID-19 vaccination coverage has crossed 94 crore 62 lakh mark. Out of the total vaccination, more than 68 crore vaccine doses have been given as first dose, while over 26 crore 62 lakh doses have been administered as second dose. Union Health Ministry has said that more than 60 lakh vaccine doses were administered today. The vaccination exercise is a tool to protect the most vulnerable population groups in the country from COVID-19, continues to be regularly reviewed and monitored at the highest level.
1 million doses of the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine arrived in Dhaka on Saturday as commercial supply from the Serum Institute of India (SII). This is the third commercial consignment from the SII, taking the total number of vaccines supplied to Bangladesh to 8 million doses. Government of Bangladesh, Beximco Pharmaceuticals and SII had signed an agreement in December last year for the supply of 30 million doses of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccines to Bangladesh. The government of Bangladesh and the United Nations signed an MOU on Saturday for the relocation of Rohingya refugees to the newly developed facility at the Bhasan Char Island. According to a press release issued by the UNHCR, the MOU sets out the policy framework of services and common protection for the Rohingya humanitarian response on the island. The MOU recognizes the generosity of the government of Bangladesh for hosting almost 9 lakh Rohingya refugees in the country. It allows for close cooperation between the Bangladesh government and the UN to provide services and activities for the benefits of the increasing number of Rohingya refugees living on the island.
A group of 136 countries have signed a landmark global treaty to enforce a corporate tax rate of at least 15% for large multinationals. The deal marks a shift in tax policy because it not only imposes a minimum corporate tax rate, but it also forces companies to pay taxes where they operate, not just where they have their headquarters. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, announced this major breakthrough after years of disagreement. The OECD said the landmark deal, agreed by 136 countries and jurisdictions, represents more than 90% of global GDP. It will also reallocate more than $125 billion of profits from around 100 of the world's largest and most profitable multinational enterprises to countries worldwide. In women's cricket, Australia beat India by 4 wickets in a low-scoring second T20 of 3-match series at Crore Oval in Queensland today. Chasing a victory target of 119 runs set by India, the hosts overhauled the target with 5 balls to spare. Both Beth Mooney with 34 of 36 and Talia McGrath with 42 not out of 33 played crucial knocks to deny India a morale-boosting win.
Now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. Washington Post says South Korea charges 15 in sex abuse case as military grapples with mistreatment of female and trans soldiers. Globe and Mail writes, Facebook biased against facts, Nobel Peace Prize winner Maria Ressa says. Financial Times reports World Bank and IMF face fight for survival during US-China rivalry. Wall Street Journal writes Mexican officials detained 652 migrants in truck near US border. South China Morning Post says coronavirus. Sydney nears Freedom Day, Fiji to reopen for tourism.
A quick look at the headlines once again. Prime Minister Narendra Modi holds bilateral talks with his Danish counterpart Mette Frederiksen in New Delhi. India and Denmark sign 4 agreements in different sectors including skill development and environment. Also decide to expand ties in fields of health and agriculture. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar to pay a 4-day visit to Kyrgyz Republic, Kazakhstan and Armenia from tomorrow. Indian Coast Guard holds an important place in world's best maritime forces, says Defence Minister Rajnath Singh. Chinese President Xi Jinping vows reunification with Taiwan, says wants to see peaceful reunification occur under one country, 2 systems. And in women's cricket, Australia beat India by 4 wickets in second T20 in Queensland.
India is celebrating the 152nd birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. Before we end, let us listen to his favourite bhajan Vaishnava Jan by artists from Uganda on their Independence Day. Vaishnava Jan to tene kahiye je iru karai jane re har dukh se upkhar kare toye man abhiman na re Vaishnava Jan to With that, we end this bulletin. We will be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News. Good night.